Technical Timeout, Episode 1.
So don't hesitate to go see older coaches, ask them questions. And most of these people, like myself, will be really glad to answer and help you because...
Coming straight from Jump Volleyball Studios in the heart of Hamilton, Ontario, welcome to Technical Timeout, the podcast that digs into the habits of successful volleyball coaches. Now here's your host, Louis-Pierre Mainville.
Hi everyone, LP here. If you want to know a bit about me and about why I decided to start this podcast, please go to the episode 00 and give it a listen. It is short and sweet, and it says it all. So, welcome to this very first episode of Technical Timeout, the podcast in which I try to find out what makes great volleyball coaches by interviewing them. It's that simple. So, Technical Timeout is the official podcast of Jump Volleyball Training, a volleyball program based out of Hamilton, Ontario, whose goal is to empower young volleyball players and coaches so they unleash their full potential. Jump Volleyball Training offers clinics, private coaching, and summer camps where former professional players share their knowledge and experience. So if you want to know more about Jump Volleyball Training and see how it can help you in your team, well, you just go to jumpvolleyball.com. And if you go to jumpvolleyball.com/podcast, well, you will also find all the info about this show. So, Episode 1. When I decided to make that show, I asked myself who should be in the first episode, and I didn't have to think for too long. It had to be the coach who had the biggest impact on my career and who coached me for the longest time, and that is Glenn Hoag. It turns out that Glenn is one of the most respected volleyball coaches on the planet. As a professional coach, he has won many national championships in Europe and has won the prestigious Champions League. He is currently the Canadian men's national team coach and has led the team to their best performances of the last 25 years or so. And as he will tell you in the interview, at the moment, Glenn is also coaching in Turkey. So Glenn's success as a coach comes from his great passion for volleyball, but also from his never-ending quest for improvement. He is always learning, even though he's one of the best in the world, and he's always willing to share ideas. So I thought that it wouldn't be too bad for a first episode. The only thing I had to do is that I just had to figure out how to run an interview because I had never done it. Now, I'm not sure if I achieved that goal, so please bear with me as I'm not the most entertaining interviewer out there yet, because I'm sure that it will come in future episodes and that I will get better. So in this episode, you will hear Glenn talk about his biggest challenge when he started coaching, and he also talks about developing young players and what he learned from the development of his own son as a volleyball player, and that is Nicholas Hoag, Team Canada's upcoming outside hitter. So lots of good stuff coming in this episode from one of the most knowledgeable volleyball coaches in the world. I hope you enjoy. I'm sure you will learn tons. So without further ado, here's Glenn Hoag. Hi, Glenn. Welcome to the show.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. So I want to start off by telling people, well, people know that you are the head coach of the national team. Most people will know you for that, for the Canadian national team. But I want to ask you where you are right now and what you're doing right now.
Right now, I'm in Izmir, Turkey. I'm coaching a first division team, and where the main sponsor is Arkash Holding, which is a company that's in trade and transportation, like big boats with containers and stuff. So they're the main sponsor of the team. We have also two Canadian players here, Gord Perrin and Gavin Schmidt. And I've been here now, it's my 5th year. Before that, I was in Slovenia with Bled and Paris Volley a few years back. But yeah, that's where I'm at now.
So coaching the pros, that's good. And so you have an extensive background in coaching at professional level. But I think that I've heard that in Turkey, is it possible that you're not just in charge of the pro team, but that you also work with players at a lower level?
Yes, we have here at the club, we have a physical structure, a big a building called Arkash Sport, and it's a building with 2 gyms that are dedicated just to volleyball. So we have about 700 boys and girls of all ages that participate, and So I am the technical director of this organization. So we structure everything from physical training of the kids from all ages, adapted to all ages, to volleyball training, to managing the coaches, and obviously the senior team for me. But it's it's quite a bit of responsibility, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Wow, 700 boys and girls. I wish we had some sort of training center like this in Canada. That's a lot of kids playing volleyball. But that's great because the goal and the purpose of this show is to interview experienced coaches to try to get their tips and tricks so that coaches that work with younger athletes can get some advice from those experienced coaches. So it's going to be nice later to kind of dig into a little bit of that because, you coach pros, but the work that you do with those young boys and girls there, I think that's going to be very valuable. So you were my coach for 8 years on the Canadian national team, but I don't even think that I know how you started coaching, and I'd like to hear that story.
Well, I got into coaching when I stopped playing my professional career as a player in 1993, and I went right up to coach University of Sherbrooke, which was already like a senior athlete level. But frankly, it took me a while to make the separation from being a player and knowing what a player knows to becoming a coach, which is more of a teaching, with more leadership, learning how to be patient because we know that the growth of an athlete takes time. This took me 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and it's through meeting other coaches and having some excellent mentors that helped me understand what the real role of a coach was. So I did that. I also have a diploma. I have a bachelor's degree in education. So I always had, even as a player, I always was studying what my coaches were doing, writing down a lot of the stuff that they did, and that really helped form me as a coach for the future.
So would you say that was your biggest challenge, to go from being a player to kind of having a coach's perspective?
Yeah, because when you start coaching and you've been a player, you kind of wonder why the players don't know what you know.
Yeah.
And it's just meeting my mentor, Charles Cardinal, that told me one day, he says, just remember how you were 20 years ago. And he said, start from that point, and then you'll understand what they're thinking or what they're going through. And that was kind of a breakthrough for me. Then it was just all about learning the part about the teaching and learning very much with Charles about context. What's your environment? What environment? Young players, older players. How many hours a week are you training, so that you could set goals that are attainable. And when I started understanding that, then the coaching part became really, really interesting and very challenging, because it is always a challenge, actually.
Yeah, that's super powerful what you just said about, I think, setting goals that are achievable depending on your structure and on your environment. And I think that's what one of the challenge with coaches that coach youth is that environment is always changing. From one year to another, you might not have the same time to train your athletes. You might work with 6 athletes on one team. On the other team, you're going to have 12 of different levels. That's always changing, and I think that's challenging. So I think setting some reachable goals is definitely a good tip here for the coaches listening. Now, you just mentioned one of the trick that you got was to kind of put yourself into the shoes of the athletes you were coaching. And I guess when you started and you were coaching university level athletes, maybe it was easier to do that because that level wasn't as far from where you were in terms of, okay, you had just been playing pro, but university is just a step before. Now, how would you advise those coaches that are working with athletes that are 14 years old and 15 years old, and for whom it's very hard to relate to their athletes because it's been so long since they were 14 years old and 15 years old? So I would really like to hear you on that, because you work with the pros, but you also coach the young ones in Turkey.
The big thing it's keep it simple. It is as challenging to coach senior athlete, university athlete, as it is young athletes. it's not so different in one aspect. And that aspect is try to measure. If you profile the athlete knowing that, okay, you've got the girl that's never played before versus the girl that's played for 3 years. While you don't start at the same point, you're not going to set the same objective. You might work differently. You need to know your athletes when you profile them, where they come from. Are they confident? Are they not confident? Do they have any athletic past or history that might help in their development, although they're starting a new sport, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that's the really important part is the capacity, developing the capacity, because it doesn't come naturally to measure. It can be complex measures, it can be very, very superficial measures, depending on the time that you have and the tools that you have. And no, that gives you your point, a point to start setting up the different challenges that you're going to face as a coach with this athlete or these athletes, and the challenges that you're going to face, that the athlete's going to face, and how you're going to guide this athlete through those phases of learning, because it is frustrating for the athlete. There's failure through learning, always failure. There's never not failure. But if you guide the athlete, say, I'll be there for you, we're going to do this together, and we're going to take the steps that it takes because you're passionate about this sport, and we'll take you to where we can take you given the environment that we have, So that's the way I try to perceive it. And it's as much for the pros as it is for athletes from high school. It's just that the means and the context are different.
Yeah, that's so true. And I like that you say that there is not such a big difference between coaching high-level athletes and young athletes, because I think that sometimes coaches forget about that. But I like what you say about reminding or kind of guiding the athletes through failure, because we all know that for an athlete or a young player to learn, they will have to fail. I mean, you try something new, you miss it, and then you just try again until you make it, and then once you make it and that new technique becomes natural, then you've learned something. But you're going to go through all those failures before. And I think that's an interesting point, and definitely something to remember for the coaches out there that work with the young athletes, the 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, with those athletes that sometimes have bad self-confidence, just to be there and to guide them through those failures, because it's by being successful at guiding them through the failures that the athletes will grow and learn. So, Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's very, very interesting. So coming back to measuring, you mentioned measuring where the athletes are at. Do you have any particular tool that you use for that, or any particular resource?
Well, there's all kinds of tools available. If you're going to measure the physical capacity of your athletes, some of them are simple, such as jumping, block jumping. Maybe some small agility tests with time, like a T-test where you have to touch cones in a T fashion and then measure the agility of your athlete. So those are kind of simple. Then you can go to the skill testing, and some of it is you can have a very objective type of measurement where you write down, okay, this is a very good pass. You give it a quotation, a 4 or 3, depending on what system you want to use, and so on. So 7 passes out of 10 on the money, which can mean a target of, 2 square meters in a certain zone, and then you measure, and this gives you a point of departure, saying, well, this girl or this boy passes 3 out of 10 on the money from this position. So by the end of the year, I would like them to increase their level of passing. Part of it too is there's 2 ways to measure. There's measuring practice, but there's also measuring in games, because with the stress of the games, and often the athletes will react differently, so you need to measure that as well. So, but you can. I'm sure there's a lot of. I think the provinces can help with the federations, provincial federations can help with some of that stuff. Is coaches that need it, but. Some other aspects are much harder to. Some other tools are trying to, for example, evaluate psychologically an athlete. You can have the help of a specialist, but it's often expensive. So if you want to do it yourself, I suggest direct communication with the athlete, knowing a little bit their background, parents, and where they come from, and if through communication directly with the athletes, you can know what their past is all about and where they come from, and that helps you understand them, and then see how they react to practice, to games, and then decide maybe on some way that you can help the athlete coping with situations and stuff. So there are very, very many tools available now for all kinds of measurement. The important thing really is to set them up so that they're fairly easy for you to use. Because if you don't have a lot of staff to do that, then you might be alone, or might have an assistant or other athletes helping you evaluate the athletes when you're in a game or in practice, and then but set up a protocol of different measurement that help you know if your athlete is actually moving forward or maybe backward, and then what will be your strategy to change, because maybe what you're doing is not the right thing, or maybe it is. So,
wow. I mean, I have a hard time right now just keeping up with you, because you've pretty much given our listeners a full coaching course right there in like a few minutes. That's awesome. So yeah, evaluating where you are at with your coaching definitely is important. And all you've said about evaluating the skills, I think that's super valuable. And I think that's something that not a lot of coaches do. They'll start their season with kind of the goal in mind without actually evaluating where their players are at the beginning of the season. So I like all those tips you mentioned, and especially about psychology. Personally, it's not something that I necessarily have thought of, but definitely something that I will keep in mind and definitely try in my own coaching. So great tip there again to take out of that for coaches listening. Now, you mentioned physical testing, and I think that's something people are fairly familiar with. The one thing that you mentioned that I want to dig into a little bit more is the skills evaluating. You mentioned evaluating skills in an objective way, and that kind of that's leading me to a question that I've wanted to ask you for a bit. And the question is the following: you coach at a high level, so you've been coaching in university. You coach with Team Canada. Now you coach in Turkey. What would you say when you have new players coming in? And that probably happens with Team Canada when you are at tryouts. But when you have young athletes knocking at the door of Team Canada or whatever team you're coaching, what are the skills that most often you see are lacking in those athletes? Or what are the skills that you wish they had that they don't have?
Probably the skill that we're the weakest at is our serving.
And that's in Canada, right?
Yeah, in Canada in general. We don't have great servers if I compare to the international game. So we spend a lot of time with Team Canada working on our serves and trying to find a serve that will be a serve that can be distracting for the other team, before we... but we back it up also with the block defense system. We're quite systematic in the sense that since we're not a traditional volleyball country and we're not necessarily demographically one of the biggest countries in the world, so meaning when we're 30-some million, the Americans are 300 million, they'll always have bigger people. They'll always have, probably genetically, like they have more choice. So I can't really compare myself to them. So really what we're trying to do is have a good block defense system so that sometimes, we have players that can put some weight with their serving, but sometimes we ask them to manage them tactically, like serve in certain areas so that we can set up our block defense system. So the skills that support that are as important. What I mean is that, okay, we can learn to serve better and be really good server, but I don't think we'll ever be as good as the Russians, for example, that have a big serve block philosophy. So my philosophy is really an all-around philosophy. So we try to get everybody to be good in all skills, but serving is really one of the weaker skills we have in Canada. So
becoming good in every skill, definitely something important. But why would you say serving is such a problem in Canada? Is there a particular reason that you can point out?
No, just because we don't volleyball is a school-based sport, so we don't play a lot of volleyball. We train a couple times a week. Compared to Europeans or South American or traditional volleyball countries where they have club system, I can see here in Turkey the kids are starting already at a very, very young age, 7 years old, 8 years old, and they'll be starting to test serves at 10, 11 years old. So motor patterns that they're learning at those ages, they learn to serve good floats or they learn to serve good spins. So it carries on to a later age. In Canada, it's a little bit, we start usually around 14, 15, 16, and often players will do two sports, especially in Ontario and the Western Province where they play basketball and volleyball, so they don't practice the skills as many hours and perfect it the way the traditional countries do. So that's part of the problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, considering that context you just mentioned, you just talked about, what can coaches that work with young athletes in Canada do in order to improve that skill in our athletes?
Well, you got to see serving as an individual skill, not as a skill that is dependent. It's not so dependent on others, meaning passing. Your setter needs a pass to set a ball to the outside. So the setter can bonify a pass. Can be, if he's an athletic setter, then you can push the pass high, then the pass will be considered a perfect pass received.
Yeah.
If it's a smaller setter, maybe you won't pass it over, because if it goes over, then it's not a positive receive. So you're really dependent on other actors in other skills. But serving is a skill by itself. But serving is an important skill in the sense that it leads you to either provoking some difficulty in the opponent's receive, thus putting pressure on their offense, and then helping you maybe setting up your block defense better. There's many things that we need to look at. There's power, we can use if we want to develop a spin serve, develop it early, and give confidence to the actor, to the athlete that they can do it. If you stop them every time they try it, and at a young age they won't. They'll become too nervous trying it and stuff, and it's a high risk serve, I'm sure, early especially. But if an athlete develops a good serve for the future, then you've done a great job as a coach. Also, there's different aspects about serving tactically. Now the float serve with the Mikasa ball is becoming a very efficient serve. We saw the last World Championship. And so the athletes that are using serves from different places on the baseline to try to distract the receiver's pattern. So if you serve from 1 or 5 at different areas, 2, 1, and 5, or in what we call the conflict zones between the receivers, those are motor skills that we can't get our kids used to early. That there is a tactical purpose to your serving, not just putting the serve in, but as you control it or as you're learning the skill, let's try to go into areas where we think we can do some damage, for example. Often we try to, let's just work on the skill of serving, but not explain why we're serving.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I have been coaching some athletes, and I'll ask them to serve, and then all they'll do is they'll go to the baseline and just serve the ball. But, I mean, they'll just serve it in the middle of the court. And then once you start asking them about a little bit of serving tactics, then they're not sure what I mean, and then they're not really sure what to do. And I think that's super interesting and super valuable what you just said. And I think we could go on and on talking about serve, because that's actually one point that sometimes frustrates me when I go to a volleyball tournament and I see coaches always telling the kids where to serve. They tell them always where to serve, and the kids are usually able to serve that target, but then they're not able to actually make that decision by themselves, and they don't know why they need to serve to 1, for example, if the coach told them to serve to 1. And they don't know why they should serve to 1. They don't know why maybe they should serve short in position 3 to take maybe the pipe hitter out, all that stuff. So training that tactical side of serving is an awesome tip, and I think that's something every coach should look into doing. And also what you mentioned about giving the kids the chance to try those harder serves. If you have one athlete that is able to do a spike serve, even though they might miss, just let them do it, and that's the way they will get better. And I think that's another thing that we can definitely get better at in Canada, is letting our athletes try those things. too often I feel like we just go for the victory and we want the server to just put the ball in the court. But really, when you're 15, you need to go out there and try that spike serve. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned starting young. Some athletes start young in other countries, and that's one of the reasons you mentioned they are able to develop, a killer serve. Now, it's fun that you talk about that, because that's another thing I wanted to touch on. And obviously that's, it's a little bit personal, because I want to talk about your son. I want to talk about Nicholas Hoag. For those who don't know him, he's Glenn's son, but he's also a new member of Team Canada. Just joined the team a couple of years ago, and he's already had a big impact on the national team. And he's only 20 years old now? 21?
He's 22 now, yeah.
Oh, so he's 22, but he joined the team when he was 20. Yeah, mm-hmm. So that's very young for a Canadian athlete to join the national team. And the one thing that I wanted to talk about is, you'll hear stuff like, oh yeah, for sure, it's Nicholas Hoag. I mean, he was born with volleyball in his blood, but I don't believe in that, and I know you don't either. And I kind of would like you to maybe explain a little bit of process of why Nick was able to make it to the national team at such a young age, and kind of what the steps were, and then we'll talk about maybe how can coaches learn from that, and how they can kind of learn from those principles and maybe apply them in their practice. So I'd like you to maybe just tell me why you think Nick was able to make it at such a young age.
A part of it was me kind of wanting to see what the LT80, the long-term athlete development model, as I was working on it with the federation early, would look like. And so what we did is we, with some colleagues from the university in Sherbrooke, we started working on Nick with Olympic lift stuff, and that was when I was back in Sherbrooke, because Nick had been playing volleyball since the age of 7 when I was in Paris, and was already spin serving at 10 just because he was watching the pro spin serving. So
he was spin serving at 10. So yeah, and so then coaches that think their athletes at 15 can't do it can kind of maybe rethink.
Yeah, but because also in France they have a very game-like approach to the youth development, so they want them to explore. They let them do it. They don't really judge, or they'll correct. But hey, you want to serve like Paul Durden? Then go ahead, Nick. Serve like Paul Durden. Paul was playing for me at that time in Paris, and so Nick was like had his rosy cheeks there, and with just big smile on his face, and his coach would let him do it, and he'd miss a lot, but kept doing it until he mastered it. And he mastered it actually fairly early, around 12, 13. He already had a good spin serve. But also when I came back, we didn't have the structure that France has, where they have a very good development for the youth with a very structured approach. So what I did is I took upon, with some colleagues from the university, we started working on some special training for him and others, other young kids, that we wanted to work on motor skills and stuff early, like footwork and stuff, because we knew they were going to be tall people. And so we did some of that with them. A video. I remember him doing a session with you, actually, that I still have that video when he's 11, and we've got him doing Olympic lift training, not with weights, but he's training with the bar, learning how to do snatches, and I can send it to you, Louis. I have it somewhere. I'll find it. Yeah,
send it to me, and I will put it, and I will put the link into the show notes. So for those listening, if you go to technicaltimeout.com and you look for Glenn's episode, it's going to be in the show notes. So yeah, sure, send that to me, and I'll put that out there for everyone to see.
We're working with Martin Roy there, who was a teacher and an ex weightlifter, but those technique he had to learn. If I thought that he had to learn early, and so now he has no problem executing these kind of exercises. So after that, part of the problem that we had in Sherbrooke is at an early age, when we came back from Paris, there was no volleyball for the younger guys. So he had to train And at his school, there was none. So we moved him to the Sport Études, the sports school au Collège de Triolet in Sherbrooke. And he spent 2 years there, and that was very formative. Although there was only a few boys, he worked on his skills tremendously and physically, in the morning, almost every day.
So did he do, sorry to interrupt you, Dion, did he do strictly volleyball there? Or was it also other sports?
Mainly volleyball and like a lot of physical training.
And that was
skill stuff.
And that was every day?
Pretty well every day, yeah. We drove him. It was early, because the Sport Études, I think they were training from 7 till 9, then they would go to class. So it was quite a helpful part of his life. And slowly, then he joined the junior national team at one point. Went to World Championship in Brazil. So there was a lot of, but he was already, a player that had, you could see, had the basis to be a very, very good player. And I was there also, helping him, coaching him, watching video with him, showing him people that, hey, here's a good receiver, here's a good, that helps a lot. If you can have examples, here's a good receiver, here's a good spiker, here's some of the shots that the spiker uses in certain situations. So we still do that now with Nick. I analyze almost all his games now. He plays pro in France. He's still very much in the learning phase of his career. So, but he also made the choice to go directly to pro, which was a big choice in his life, to put aside school for now. Same thing with TJ Sanders, Gavin Schmidt. Those guys have decided to move directly to the for a pro career, and have been very successful.
Well, yeah, and like you said, they keep learning, and they probably made that choice so that they could keep learning and improving. And so as a volleyball player, you learn for a long time. So yeah, you learn all the way. And the things that I take away from what you just said about Nick's development as a volleyball player, his first motor skills. So you said you worked a lot on motor skills with him when he was young. And the other thing is, you mentioned something about when he was in France. You mentioned that they would let the athletes try and miss. And again, I'm going to repeat it. I think I've said this already, but I think it's very important for coaches out there to just trust their athletes and let them try and let them miss, especially in practice when it's the time to do that. There must be some place for making mistakes in practice, and I think coaches should definitely be more like that, be more like let them try and miss. Do you make room for that in your own practices? How do you deal with that with your athletes?
Yes, what we do is, and we work daily on skills of serving, but what you have to develop as a coach too is the capacity to correct, to identify errors and correct. And how do you correct? How do you help the athlete just make the small modification if it's a senior athlete to get a better output, on his serve? With a younger athlete, sometimes, we need to really improve on your footwork, on your toss, on your, so you need to detect the errors. Otherwise, result is not a good, to develop an athlete at becoming a better volleyball player, especially at a young age. Winning a tournament doesn't necessarily make you do that. And what I mean by this is that, you have an athlete that's got great potential, and you win a season, but you do the exact same thing the next year, the athlete might not progress. And so you need to measure that. So that's kind of separate. For me, result is separated from performance. Performance is the output of the athlete at that moment. And so I measure performance in practice as well. And then if I see that performance on the serve is not there, then I say, okay, well, I need to find out why it's not there that day. Is he tired? Or is he not, is his toss not right? And then I need to bring corrections. So for me, result is not so much, if I play a weak team and we score 5 aces, am I going to play those 5? Am I going to score the 5 aces against a really good team with good receivers? Then probably not. I don't know that. So that's why I need to measure and make sure that performance can be repeated no matter who's in front on the other side.
And do you measure Also, if you know that the athlete is practicing a new skill, so for example, you have an athlete who's trying a new, like a new serve, for example, or a new footwork for blocking, and you see that athlete is missing a lot because he's probably trying something new. Do you measure still, and how do you deal with that as a coach?
Well, first I let the athlete, you give him a few tips, let them explore. Like if you want the girl, the boy wants to try a spin serve, let's go. You want to try, go. And then give him a few hints on, how you should toss, how your footwork should be. And then go again. And then go, try. And let them try for a bit before you intervene, because if you intervene too much, it becomes a little bit overbearing for the athlete, and distracting. So I tend to let them go, and then give some tips here and there, Sometimes I won't say much for a whole week if we're with an athlete that I'm trying to change some behaviors. I give him 2 or 3 tips, remind them the tips a little bit, but let them go, let them explore. And then, okay, let's sit down. I use video. I use my iPad a lot now. There's a lot of good apps anyways for cutting video, quickly, and then you can show the athletes some of the aspects of their serving.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second. I think it's so valuable what you just said, and I'm just going to use those 3 words, let them explore. And you just said that you sometimes wait a week, and I assume that's with players that practice every day. So that might mean, 8 to 10 practices maybe?
Yeah, it can be. It can be a shorter time, but sometimes I do like to see them to explore something, to try to figure it out themselves, and then to be just a guide behind, and offer guidance. That's it.
That's great, and I think just that, if I just put that as the show, those just 2 minutes as the episode, I think that would already be super valuable. So let them explore, and coaches, be patient out there. Let your athletes try things and improve. So that's awesome, Glenn. I really like where the conversation went. Now I just want to get into some rapid fire questions so that we can finish this off. All right. So if you are ready, I'm just going to get going. What are the words that you use the most during a practice?
I'd like to tell them to keep their focus, because often, if they practice, especially with pro athletes, they practice a lot. Sometimes they get bored. Sometimes they just, it's repetitive. So, I want them to keep their focus. I want them to have their best performance at that practice, and the best performance they can have at that practice, so that we can keep the level of execution high. If not, you get 1, 2 players that are absent, mentally and not focused, then it can really make the practice performance quite poor. So that's one that I repeat often: stay focused, stay concentrated. I like that one. Then I try to encourage too when on good things. We talk a lot, depending on the type of practice. I'll talk about system and say, okay, let's remind each other what's important. Cover our hitters on a high ball. Communicate, for example, is a good one, because it is a team sport. So
keep focus and communicate. If you could go back in time to the moment you started coaching, what advice would you give yourself?
Find a good mentor that can help you, or find people that coaches with experience, and don't fear failure, because a lot of coaches, because they fear failure, they fear to be judged because they're young coaches and stuff, don't go and see other coaches, don't expose themselves. And I think it's a big mistake. So don't hesitate to go see older coaches, ask them questions. And most of these people, like myself, will be really glad to answer and help you, because we have the same passion for the same sport. So why, I'm not a very judgmental person. I want coaches to be good, because they can bring very good athletes to my program. So I will help, and I think most coaches do help.
Name one habit of yours that you think is related to your success as a coach.
I like to talk with my athletes. I'm a people's person. I'm not really a cold kind of guy. So probably that would be the dominant one. and I have a big passion for the game. So I like to study. I read a lot about coaching, management, all kinds of stuff. So
great that you talk about reading, because my next question was going to be about a book that you could recommend for the volleyball coaches out there.
Well, to understand what it takes for an athlete to grow, The Talent Code is a great book. It's simple, and it just tells you basically what an athlete needs. It's a very simple read. The second one, if I have a second one, would be Mindset by Carol Dweck. Great book. Teaches you how to be a person in a growth mindset, a mindset that is able to face difficulty, to face obstacle, to surmount obstacle, to face failure, and so on. The book is very, very good. It's a study by Carol Dweck, and she gives tons of examples, and it's also a very short and easy read.
So I will put the link towards those two books in the show notes. And so you mentioned Mindset was by Carol Dweck, and Talent Code is by Daniel Coyle, right?
Daniel Coyle, yeah.
All right. Just want to make sure we got the right book here. So a couple more questions to finish here. Is there a particular coaching quote that you would like to share with us?
I think a John Wooden quote that I like a lot. It's failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So for me, preparing everything you do, prepare a good practice. Then probably if you prepare a good practice and you're ready to go, you will run a good practice. If you're good at, and if you do a good job, then you will get growth from your athlete in the long run. If it's too random, you don't measure, you don't do anything, I don't know how you can know. Some athletes will grow through what you do, but they might not grow as fast as you want them to. So that John Wooden has many quotes, and there's many other quotes by coaches, but I do like that one.
Yeah, he definitely has a lot, and I think it comes back often. John Wooden is always there whenever I ask for a quote about coaching. Like I would say half the time that it comes from him. So prepare, plan, and measure. Now you mentioned tools earlier in the conversation. You were talking about different apps. I don't know if there is one app in particular that you use during your practices.
The one I use is Dartfish Express that goes with, it's a small app, and it's great because it's got it's for video with your iPad or your iPhone. And you can roll, you got a little wheel where you can go back and forth, and you can also work on angles. I work a lot with the setters and wanting their center gravity in the right position, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a great little tool. There's a couple, I don't know which one. There's a couple time delay video apps. I don't know the names.
I think one of them is called just time delay, I believe, or video delay or something.
Yeah. Those are excellent apps. If somebody just served, you want to show them their serve like a few seconds after. Those are great apps to work with.
So definitely that's useful. And again, those all those resources, they will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn about them and get the links, you just go to technicaltimeout.com and you look for Glenn's interview. Great. So now I just want to finish the interview and our conversation by asking you where or how could people learn more about you and maybe get in touch with you if they want to know more.
They can learn more about me probably on the Volleyball Canada website. I think there's information there, and then they can follow or even try to contact me on that website.
Okay, so that's volleyball.ca. Well, Glenn, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me and to share your impressive knowledge and experience with me and with all the coaches out there that are listening. I really appreciate that. And on behalf of all the listeners, I want to thank you for spending the time and sharing all that information.
Okay, Louis, thank you very much. Great job on that podcast. I'm quite impressed and on the website. And we'll be following closely. And good luck to all the coaches. Keep doing a great job. Your job is very, very important to the young people that you're working with.
So good luck with your team, and we'll catch you later.
All right, sounds good, Louis.
Guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Glenn, and if you made it that far, it's because it was somewhat interesting. So if you have time to rate and review the show, it would be great, and it would help get the show to the ears of more coaches. So don't forget to check out the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in this episode. We are on social media, so follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/jumpvball, and on Twitter, just at LP Mainville. No Twitter account for the show yet. Maybe it will come, but for now, just my personal account. So if you want to get in touch with me. So that's it. Thanks for making it through the first episode. It feels good to have that one out of the way. And now let's get more coaches on.